Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. In a recent conversation that I had with one of my close friends in the coffee industry, the question was asked, Lee, how do you feel about a lot of the new coffee processing methods that are coming to market by different producers around the world? And I was quite taken aback by the question. Simply because I wasn't aware that there was all this judgment going on about these new processing methods. And so as I explored the question and asked why the person was asking me, I came to realize that in different specialty coffee cultures around the world, there are different opinions on the different processing methods that are emerging and how they're being received in different aspects of each of the cultures. And so I thought it would be important for us to unpack that and have a conversation about it and see what we can explore, let's say, about these our approach to these new processing methods. All right, so what are these new processing methods that I'm talking about? So some 5 to 8 years ago, maybe a little bit more, fermentation processes and processing coffee, including fermentation tanks, let's say, in the processing of coffee started to become quite popular. And different fermentation techniques have been explored and developed in different coffee growing countries around the world. Influences from the wine industry and other food manufacturing industries have influenced this, and what we've started to see is variants of fermentation processes happening around the world. Some of those processing methods have led to extreme variations from where it originated, and others have just deviated slightly. And in the conversation that I was having, the person was telling me about a conversation that they were privy to where somebody believed that it shouldn't be fair for people to compete with coffee that was processed using extreme techniques of fermentation in the coffee processing method. So they were of the opinion that people shouldn't be allowed to use coffees that are termed supernatural. You shouldn't be allowed to use coffees that are fermented in tanks where fruit is added to the fermentation to influence the flavor of the green. All of these different variations of coffee processing methods are leading to influencing the flavor of coffee variant from the, let's say, original flavor of what the green bean would have tasted like had you not have influenced the characteristics of the coffee with the fermentation process. Now, to be fair, it's not just things like the fruit that you add to a fermentation tank that influences the way that the coffee is going to end up tasting. There are so many variables outside of the fermentation tank as well as in the fermentation tank that influence the flavor of how the product is going to taste once it ends up on the cupping table. And it doesn't just include the process from the producer. It also includes transport, it includes roast profiles, it includes brewing water, it includes brewing temperature, it includes a lot of things, grind, etc., etc. So suggesting that the fruit or the fermentation process should be signaled out as the thing that it disqualifies a coffee from being presented in competition isn't fair, in my opinion. And I would encourage that we, like with everything, we don't focus on how we want to exclude. I would encourage that we want to find reasons to stay more open to better innovation and more progress so that we can continue to develop and grow the industry as we move along. But why are people judging these different fermentation processes, and why are people suggesting that we should not be including these coffees in competitions and we should not be including them, in the same category as coffees that aren't processed the same way, similar to the fact that we separate out commercial grade coffee from specialty coffee. And I have heard people say, should we be creating a completely different category from specialty for these types of coffee? And it's an interesting question. But why should we stop judging these coffees? In the sense, I don't mean from a competition perspective, I mean from the perspective of we seem to think that they are better or worse than what we currently have on offer as the traditional form of specialty coffee, specialty grade coffee. And the reason is because the moment we start judging these kinds of things as though there's an issue with them or there's a problem with them, similar to the way that we were judging natural coffees. And, there are people in our industry that are famous for suggesting that natural coffees are far less superior than washed coffees. If we fall into that trap, we are reliving the same what's the right word? We are living the same mistakes, in my opinion, that we lived in previous years as we evolved and established ourselves as an industry. If we remain open to encouraging producers, encouraging people who participate in competitions, encouraging green buyers for companies that want to support these businesses and invest in these farms, if we encourage coffee roasters that want to support producers, and we encourage producers that want to drive innovation with different forms of technology and different ideas behind how they can become more sustainable or reuse water or reuse agricultural resources that are available on their farms and repurpose them in the coffee production process, which is, just as a side here, it is some of the reasoning behind how some of these processing techniques were developed. Producers had extra resources that they needed to use, and so they decided to add them to fermentation tanks or explore different processing methods with these things in mind. We should be encouraging this behavior. We should be finding a way to support it. And that leads me to the last thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to this subject is how should you respond if you are in a conversation and you hear somebody talking shit about, oh, I don't want to drink coffees that have been fermented with pineapple in the fermentation tank because I don't think that's real specialty coffee. I think that's cheating. Well, like with anything that somebody seems to be talking negatively about, I would encourage you to inject a more balanced opinion or approach to the conversation and probe the person with objective, assertive questions about why, so that you can better understand their perspective, which is important. Openness and having an open mind is incredibly important when we're looking at these subjects. But even more important than that is following that up with the perspective of, well, perhaps it's not such a bad idea that we do this because it helps producers or because it helps project a new direction in our industry. So the idea behind that is that we want to inject a more functional, objective perspective into the conversation so that it's not lopsided and that anyone observing the conversation doesn't walk away thinking, well, fuck, I didn't have to really think about that much, and I'm just going to do what somebody else is telling me to do and think about. So if people are exposed to conversations that are balanced and people's ideas are being challenged in a healthy, open-minded way, we can remove the need for biased judgment that knocks people down and doesn't encourage innovation and activation of exciting times for our industry ahead. I hope that's been helpful. We always want to encourage openness. We want to encourage discussion. We want to encourage people to elevate each other as well as elevating themselves, rather than looking for yet another reason to destroy someone or bring them down. That's what Map It Forward is all about. We want to rise together, but we want to encourage competition. We want to encourage innovation, and we want to encourage new ideas where people have the chance to explore them and build on them. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.